Okay, so welcome. My name is Don Ficken. I'm with the Library Telescope program, and tonight we have another program for you. This one will be about how to host a Library Telescope program star party. So we are recording this, and we had a little difficulty getting this on the Facebook, so we will post this a little bit later. And joining me is my colleague, Tom Lynch. He and I have been working on the Library Telescope along with a lot of other folks for a long time, and it's our pleasure to bring you this program tonight. So if you're not familiar with the Library Telescope program, it's been around a while, since 2008. We have at least 1,000 known locations, and we know of at least 8 countries that are participating in the program. And I would say most of the locations have telescopes. Some even have binoculars. We have a world map, and this is not even the most updated world map. We actually recently brought on South Korea, which is exciting. So it's been growing worldwide. It was started by a group in New Hampshire, and we're excited that it continues to expand globally. Our objectives in the program are pretty simple. We simply want to grow the program and share best practices. So there's a bunch of us get together each month, and we talk about things that are going well and things that are not going well and how to fix things. Tom is our master of the Facebook page. He has been growing this at an amazing pace over the years. He's got probably 7,000, almost 7,000 followers right now. They post a lot of stuff about astronomy and just about the Library Telescope program in general. And of course, our website has librarytelescope.org has a world map and a number of listed participating libraries. You can go into a state if you're in the US, or province in Canada, or in Europe, just click on the country. And once you click, you could drill down and find out at least the locations that we know about that have the Library Telescope program. And on our website, we try to offer a lot of resources for patrons and libraries. One example here is this nice star map that I'm posting actually as we speak tonight. I'll finish posting the rest for October, but it's a great star map that sometimes you get stuff that's so complicated that it's really hard to figure out things. And what we want to be able to do is give you the basics to be able to navigate, in this case, the October sky. So, and this sky map is generally available on librarytelescope.org on the homepage, and also on the Facebook page. We post that out there. So it's done by one of the Astronomical League members, and he does a great job. And usually it's not just in English, we have it in Spanish, and there's usually a feature or two, a separate map for a couple things that are going on each month. So it's really great. So tonight is obviously September 18th. This program is about hosting Library Telescope program start parties. I think it's our 44th program. Last month we had International Observe the Moon Night. I know many of you may have participated in that. We had a lot of fun in one of our locations here in the Metro St. Louis area. We'll work on October 16th. We haven't worked on that topic yet, but we'll figure that out soon. And usually in November and December, we take a break, the holidays and things like that. So we'll have maybe one more program this year after tonight, and we'll kind of go from there. All right, so we will be doing the program, but we're going to take the questions at the end. We do have folks here on Zoom, and also, well, not right now on Facebook because we couldn't seem to get connected there, but we'll post this video out there, and if you have questions, we'll kind of watch for those later. So let me stop sharing and bring up the main program tonight. All right, so Tom, can you see that okay? Yeah, just thumbs up would great. Okay, sounds like it's out there fine. So again, this is a program on hosting a Library Telescope star party. And I'm with the St. Louis Astronomical Society in St. Louis, and also the Astronomical Society of Eastern Missouri, a couple different clubs that I've been involved with for many years. We have actually 4 clubs in the Metro St. Louis area. We really are, and really what I'm talking about tonight is drawing from a lot of experience. I've been doing this almost 10 years now with the library. We've worked in many, many different situations, everything from small to large libraries. We sometimes have 2 people, sometimes we have 100 people. We have sometimes a conference room that will hardly hold us. We get into many different types of situations, and we've just learned to adapt. So we're going to I'll share what we can. Of course, there's many approaches to star parties, and what I'll be talking about tonight is really just one. And of course, what is a star party is a very fundamental thing. It's really just a gathering for the purpose of observing the objects and events in the night sky. That would be the traditional kind of thing. Obviously, if you go out into a darker area, you might be able to see something like this Whirlpool galaxy. You're not going to see anything quite like this unless you got a big telescope, but still a lot of fun to be able to go out there. And one of the challenges I think that we all face, no matter where you are, is that the sky is getting brighter all the time, which is making it more and more challenging whenever we try to do a star party, particularly at a library or within an urban area. Sometimes you can, within suburban areas, you can find kind of dark spots, but light pollution is a factor. You might find interesting to go visit darksky.org to learn more about dark sky. But you can also visit lightpollutionmap.info. It's a really fun map, and you can see the website link on there, or the URL. It's a really fun map that you can explore the world, and you can literally drill down into where you live and find out how supposedly how dark it is. This is all satellite data that they've taken over time, and you can even find where you live, maybe where the darker spots might be. So it's a fun way to actually observe this. And of course, one of the issues that we constantly come up with when we deal with libraries and even organizations is that just the glare from the lights is enough to really mess up your ability to see the night sky. And so to the extent that you can, you really want to get behind a building where you're not seeing those bright lights in your face, if you will. All right, so for the astronomers who've been around a while, this is what I experienced when I first started, there's kind of what I call a traditional star party. And that is where what you're doing is you're going out into maybe a dark area, if you will, and you're inviting people to come to look through probably your personal telescope. This could be a school, it could be a park, it could be scouts, it could be observatories on sidewalks or whatever else. And it's really, in this case, it's really about you showing somebody through your telescope the sky. You're giving them basically a tour of the sky. And that's one type of program. It's really the characteristics of this type of program. This is, by the way, at the Gateway Arch on the right-hand side. It's your personal telescope, probably if you're an astronomer, and you probably don't want the public to touch your telescope too much. They can look at the eyepiece and they can focus it, but you don't want them to mess with your telescope otherwise. Often it's any moon phase, but you probably, if you're an astronomer, you're going to want a time when there's no moon around. In other words, a new moon type of phase. So that you can see the darker objects a little better. And you're really trying to show the public, you're trying to impress them. Here's a stuff that if you were to look in the sky that you could see. And that's a lot of fun, no doubt about that. And of course, the thing that you're always concerned about when you have a star party is the subject to cancellation due to weather. It could be cold, it could be cloudy, it could be rainy. It could be difficult to see things. Maybe there's smoke in the air or whatever else. So these are all things that you're worried about whenever you're doing what I call public star party or public outreach. So I look, at least for me, I look at the library star party as different. It's really kind of a different set of goals, okay? I look at really two primary goals. And you might notice this is not necessarily observing a lot of deep sky objects in the sky. The very first goal is we want the patron, whoever it is, right there at the star party, to understand the parts and how to use that telescope to locate and focus on an object. That might be literally in a conference room, because my opinion is they can locate something in a conference room and focus and get a clear focus. It's a good start. They probably can do the same thing when they go outside. The second goal, which is the part, actually the first part is actually relatively easy to do with the library telescope because it's a pretty simple telescope. But the second part, the second goal, if you will, is to help them understand the fundamentals of navigating the night sky. We're not trying to make them experts, but what is important is that they at least understand that the sky changes and how to find north and find maybe a few stars that are reference points. If we can get them to that point, that is pretty exciting. And even if they can't see stars, maybe they can see the moon or some planets. And if they can find and focus on those, that's a pretty big deal. Of course, when you look at a telescope, this is the traditional telescope that we've had. You got so many parts, it's like confusing. So really, at the end of the day, when you start working with a patron, a lot of this stuff doesn't make any difference. It's really just a matter of picking things up with the handle and knowing where to look and taking off the dust covers. And so usually what I do is I will actually have that patron go through and literally set it up and practice how to focus on something, which means they're going through how to use the red dot finder, how to focus, and how to point the telescope, just really basic stuff. They do that a few times. It's really not that difficult. And of course, navigating the night sky, I usually try to make sure that they have a sky map available of some sort so they can at least get a reference. And of course, if you've been around astronomy for a while, you know that you can't just have one star map. You have to have a star map for the month that you're in because the sky changes throughout the year. There's different seasons, even month to month, it changes every so little. All right, so here's one approach, and I want to talk about some considerations in this approach. When you work with libraries, they do a lot of work to market these things for you, and they don't really like to cancel. I mean, they will cancel, obviously, if you have to, but it's a lot more hassle for them whenever we have weather. You will, you typically have access to a conference room, which is really great, tables and chairs, audio visual, restrooms, and what's really nice is that you can have access to staff or support. They might actually help you with crowd control, making sure that you have all the equipment that you have. That is like gold whenever you're dealing with amateur astronomy. You want to do a star party out in some dark area, you don't have all that. Importantly, the point of this is libraries want their patrons to check out telescopes in the books. So we want to promote that. We usually have book displays whenever they have a library star party. Of course, this is a library of things when you're checking out a telescope, but it's also about using the library's full set of resources, which might include books and other things. It sometimes frustrates me. We might have a program we think are going to be all children. Turns out it's all adults. Sometimes we think it's all adults. It'll be all children. But what I see is that hands-on is really important. I really want them, whether they're an adult or child, to put their hands on the telescope and not be intimidated by that. And I like to really focus on stuff that's easy to find. Like a moon, for example. If you take a 5-year-old, the moon is very easy to understand, to see. I mean, it's just really very simple. If you try to show them a deep, faint object, it's just not impressing the youngster. They'll be amazed by the moon. And if you can get them to see Saturn or something like that, that's amazing too. And of course, you got to deal with the light polluting parking lots. And sometimes I'll just simply get it behind a tree or maybe behind the building if I can, where there's something not really in my face. All right, so one approach, this is the approach that we've typically used here where I live in the Metro St. Louis area, is we have a 90-minute program. And it starts with an inside program, meaning we actually go inside. If it's winter, it's easy, it's warm, you can talk with people, they can see the telescope, they can ask you questions. If you're out in the dark, it's a lot harder to really explain all those things. So we have an inside program, and then we go outside, if we can, to apply their knowledge to the outside. And hopefully they can go look at the moon on their own or wherever it is. We try to schedule the program so that when they do go outside, if we are able to, there's a moon and planets. Sometimes the planets are not available, but usually you can just schedule where there actually is a moon available. And if they could even see the moon and focus on that, I know at least they've gotten that part. They know how to actually operate that. So a very big difference between a traditional star party is if you have your own personal telescope, you probably don't want anybody to touch it. It's understandable. You paid a lot of money for your equipment. You might have some really good eyepieces or whatever else. We really want in the library telescope that touch is a must. We want them to put their hands on it and not be fussed at if they are looking at something and they're spinning around, look at the mirror. That's just, particularly youngsters, they love to put their hands on and just explore. And I encourage that, obviously, within limits. The traditional star party, the owner will give a tour. In other words, hey, look, let me show you all the stuff you can see, and I'll take you there. You sort of, if you're a patron, sort of watching what they do, but you don't know really how they got there. Whereas the library telescope, they're going to operate the telescope. They're going to put it on the object. You might give them a hint to where to find it, but we're not necessarily out to give them a personal tour of the sky. We're out there to let them find things on their own. So to break it down a little bit, the inside program, we typically will have some how-to training up front. In other words, here's the parts of the telescope, and we'll teach them how to navigate the night sky. We'll literally get the sky maps out. We like to have a sky map in their hands so they can really say, here's the sky tonight. We point them in north, and we show them how the sky moves. We probably start at sunset or maybe even before, because the libraries often, particularly today, at least around where I live, they tend to close a little bit earlier. So we have to kind of get a running start. surprisingly, you might be surprised about this, but we don't cancel unless there's, really like ice or something like that. If it turns out the weather's bad outside, there's plenty to do inside to teach them about the telescopes, how they work, how to focus on things. It's really a fairly straightforward kind of thing. You'd be surprised how many questions that you'll get, even when it's all cloudy outside. There are different philosophies, but we like to hold the telescope star party at in a conference room of the library itself. Now, some people would like to go out and hit a remote site, and that's great. But I find over time that we'll get a little bit more people coming because it's simply the traffic getting out of the library. Sometimes you'll pick up candidates. I will like to have a couple tables in front with some handouts, and the library, what they often will do is they might have, let me say, like one telescope, one library we have around here, they might have 30 or 60 telescopes, or maybe a library only has 3. They'll be wanting to pull their telescopes out of circulation and give them to you for your star party. And what we try to do here is tell them, keep them out in circulation. There's already a big waiting list, just keep them out. And what we try to do is bring our own telescopes they're actually library telescopes. We have trainers. And I like to have about one telescope or about 10 patrons so that everybody can stay active all night. And we want to make sure they have handouts like quick start guides and sky maps and maybe a book display. So that would be a very typical situation, about 45 minutes. We go through how everything works, make sure that the basic questions are answered. And then what we'll do, if the weather permits, is we'll go outside and we'll spend about 45 minutes. If you start maybe about an hour or so after sunset, and if you make them sure that the moon is available based on the way that you set this up, when they go outside, even if the sun's not completely set, they can look at the moon. And that is really a great, and in fact, often planets will be available, even though the sun is not completely down, it's not completely dark. I will always tease that, I'm pretending like I'm a consultant, I don't actually do work. I'll make the patrons actually carry the telescopes outside. And sometimes we'll actually supplement what we have outside with, our personal telescopes, give them some extra stuff to look at. But my philosophy in general is that I don't let them look through the big telescopes until they've looked through the small telescopes and actually proven that out. So best practices that I've learned over time is that the way to time the program, in other words, when your star party is really when the moon is available. And that'll be typically a time period of, say, 3 days after what's called new moon to a few days before a full moon. And if you go out, let's say about first quarter moon, you're in the North Hemisphere, you'll be able to see the moon's up even before the sun sets. And that's perfect if you're trying to start a program early, right? You want to start the program before darkness, simply because often what happens is the library are closing early. At least ours closes at 8 o'clock now. So, particularly as you get into summer, that's pretty tough to have a star party when you don't even have darkness yet. It also helps a little bit with parents with young children. They'll tend to come if it's a little bit earlier. And I think that the patrons, will appreciate the hands-on training. I know everybody wants to go straight out and start looking at the stars, but I think the fact that they actually get hands-on training is good. One of the traps that you can get into if you're a person that's really excited about astronomy is that you just give them way too much detail. The inside program really needs to move along and be pretty brief. We need to limit the patron time on the telescope. All I really want them to be able to do is pick it up, or take the dust covers off, pick it up, and focus on something and prove to me they can focus and actually see something, and then put it all back together and let the next person do it. So I can get a line of, say, 10 people, and in 10 or 15 minutes, I can take each one of those persons, maybe if they spend a minute or so on the telescope, they at least got the idea. And of course, you got to be flexible. Sometimes what you think is going to work simply doesn't work. And so you just have to deal with it before. And one example of that is one time I had a bunch of really, really young children. I'm talking about 3 or 4 years olds coming by. And what we simply did is made a campfire. We talked about how the space worked and things like that. So you don't have to always, strictly adhere to your plans. So scheduling, we talked about that just a little bit. I think if you're familiar in general that there are phases of the moon, and the moon makes a big difference whether you can see stuff or not. But the new moon is really when the moon is in a particular position of the sky where it doesn't show up. It just simply is invisible, if you will. And what we really want to do is we want to say that's the starting point to think about it. But we really want to go a couple days after that, because that's when the moon will start coming up early enough to be able to see that even before the sunset. So you want a couple days after new moon. And then if you go to first quarter, is really good time. But if you look at the first quarter moon, it's shadowed really nicely. It's impressive to look at through a telescope. And then, of course, you can go to the full moon. And once you get to the full moon, actually the moon is coming up a little bit later. And also the challenge with full moon is that there's not a lot of shadowing going on. You're looking directly at, some cool features, of the moon, but it's not as impressive as when you get a little bit of like a first quarter moon, you get a nice angle to get some wonderful shadows. Once you get to full moon and go all the way to the very, and by the way, all that is early rise, is just to mention that. And then once you get into last quarter and all the way down to, heading back into new moon, you're not going to have a moon up early enough to really make it worth anything for a library telescope star party. So I'd try to avoid that if you can, unless you've got really dark skies and good weather, then or maybe even planets available. If you have Saturn or Jupiter available, you can get around not having the moon up because, I mean, who doesn't love to look at Saturn or Jupiter right through a telescope? But I think you'll get a lot more impressive results when the moon's up. And I would say that when you get really young people, they're even with Saturn, they will have trouble, I think, seeing Saturn. But the moon, they will you can see that they're seeing it by the mere fact that it's lighting up their face, all the light of the moon through the eyepiece. And so it's really a lot more friend. And I just say the moon's your friend at this point, in this point. And of course, you've got the moon, you got Jupiter and Saturn. Those are probably the trio that is like the best. If you can get any of those lined up for your night before the sun even sets, people who've never looked through a telescope are going to be just blown away by that at the end of the day. It's just looking at any of those, even the moon. I mean, I know a lot of people that are astronomers don't like to look at the moon that much. They say it's, I see that all the time. But if you're never looked at the moon, it's really amazing. And today, the thing is, they always want to take pictures of it, and the moon's one of the best things. You can take pictures through the eyepiece with your phone. All right, so to break this down a little bit, weather permitting, if you can't, you can actually find a location where the moon is available, and if not, and possible away from glare, you want to set up as many library telescopes as possible. In other words, if you have 100 people on a telescope, it's not going to work out too good. If you can get a lot of telescopes and keep everybody with hands on, that's good. I like to have binoculars and star maps available for people in line, even though they might be waiting in line. There's nothing to stop them to look through binoculars or study their star map a little bit. Usually, if you're in a library parking lot, there's probably enough light they can almost see the star map without a light, if you will. I want the patrons to operate the telescope. People really are tempted to show people how to operate. In other words, physically move it for them. I try not to do that. It's like completely reversing what you think, but let them actually operate. Don't actually do it for them, but let them actually turn it and move it. That is, it's a really good way for them to learn. It's engaging all their senses in there. The initial target, if you can, should be the moon, because it's easy to find, easy to see. And if you can, you can supplement these with personal telescopes. If you can extend, if you have to, which is the note up above, if you have to, and the weather's bad outside, you can just extend the inside program. And even though it's 45 minutes to start with, you might find that there's so many questions that they're happy to ask you lots of questions about telescopes and things to see, and they just have lots of questions. That's my personal experience. So bringing it all together, defined is the program is a one-night program with a group from a local library. You're trying to basically look at the stars. My goal is to really introduce the library patrons to how to use a telescope and navigate the night sky. If I feel like they can find something in the sky, even one thing, and they can at least understand the fundamentals of navigating the night sky, that's great. And an example would be just a public library. In other words, you can do this in parks, different kinds of places, but any place where you can get the patrons to actually experience this, it's really a win, in my book. And again, the characteristics, hands-on. We want you to touch a telescope. You want to learn the parts of the telescope. You want to learn how to navigate the night sky. We want to hold it probably at the library, because you actually get sometimes more people showing up particularly as you go outside. People will be walking in the library and saying, "What are you doing?" And you'll get sometimes triple the crowd simply because people are wanting to look through the telescope. You want to time this when the moon and planets are available if we can. And this is a more forgiving etiquette than a traditional star party. We want you to touch our telescope. We're okay if you have flashlights and things like that, although we try to tell them not to show them, shine them on things, because it obviously makes people lose their nighttime. seeing. And we don't cancel unless there's really severe weather, which libraries love that. Again, the goal of this library star party is just to get them to operate the telescope, navigate the sky. The patrons operate the telescopes, and I think I've already said all this, so I'm not going to go back through it again. But you can see that it's a very different type of program than a traditional library star party. So with that, I'm going to stop, and we've got a few people in our group here. And let's see if we can get a few questions from this group right here. I did not mention phone apps such as Sky Safari and our Star Walk. Those are excellent tools, which you'll find that even a star map is wonderful, but at the end of the day, everybody loves this technology. No matter what happens, people walk up and they want to talk about star apps, and that's a good point that was mentioned here. Is that they can? In fact, I often will take I have a cheap iPad, and I'll have a sky map on there that they can. They're just amazed by the whole thing. So that really is great to have. And what size tables are best to use for the program? Well, it's interesting because over time, I tend to get a normal size table. It doesn't take a very big table, but surprisingly, sometimes I will take a chair outside. And the reason I take a chair outside is when I get a 4-year-old, I can actually drop that telescope down onto a chair and then spin it down so that the little 4-year-old can literally walk up and look through it. And if they're looking at the moon, I can tell that they're seeing the moon because it just lights up their face. It doesn't take much. A long table isn't actually that much better because it turns out that you can only look like, let's say you got a table, you tend to go to the left side of the table because the way the thing tips down. And so the right side of the table really doesn't work because it's the wrong angle for the telescope to sit on and actually look through it. How important is it to teach how to read a star map? I would say very important to a point. It depends on the age. I think adults pick up a lot quicker whenever we start talking about the star maps. I think for youngsters, just understanding the moon and what's a planet and what's not a planet is a pretty good start. But to the extent that I can help them understand that the sky does change, in other words, it changes throughout the year. The stars come up a little bit earlier each night, and over the course of time, that will simply basically will change your night sky. I didn't really understand that when I first started. And then is using Night Sky Network. So yeah, so some of the, this is a question for those that are amateur astronomers. In our club, we use what's called Night Sky Network, which is part of the Astronomical Society of the Pacific. It's a great tool to schedule an event. We have, for example, a library will come to us and request the event, and then we'll schedule that and then track the number of volunteers. It's been really, really important for us to have that tool because I want to make sure that I've got enough people to support the proper star party. If I have myself and 100 people, it's going to be really difficult to do what I call a quality job. But if I can get one person to 10 or 20 and have enough telescopes for each of those people to operate them, then I think I'll do a better job overall. And I've been doing, this person says, I've been doing this at all of our star parties, not just library events. People really like touching the scope. Yes, absolutely. If they can, it's so common that a parent will be walking up with a child. The child will run toward the telescope and grab it. And the parents, what would I say, freak out a little bit. And I actually have, I'm encouraging it. So no, just let them touch it. Let them play with it. They'll spin it around. Sometimes they're a little bit more, a little crazy with it than I want, but I really try not to say anything because I really think that's just a normal process of children learning. They have to touch things, move things, and if they feel like you're going to scold them, then that inhibits their ability to just learn and do this. And then there's another question here. Do you recommend libraries try to register attendees in advance and so know how many volunteers you need? That's a tough one. At least my experience lately, it really varies. I had one library that had a cap of 50 people that said, okay, you must register for our event, and we're going to put a cap of 50 people. Now, in that case, only 6 people showed up. And so it really wasn't a good predictor of what's going on. I've had situations where we've had 50 people register and almost everyone shows up. And I've had situations where we have no registration cap. And what you do is you can get an ebb and flow. I think the libraries, for the most part, if they've been doing this a few times, will get a hang of kind of what they expect to really show up, and that will guide you. So I think it really comes down to the library. And, the librarians, if they're experienced at this, they tend to know what kind of turnouts they will have. But the other factor is this too. So there are times whenever there'll be something in the media. In other words, some big event. Maybe it's like last night we had a lunar eclipse. Maybe it's fall Perseus showers or something like that. Or maybe it's something going on in space that they just hear about, and suddenly you just get crammed with lots of people. And that's a good thing. And what I've learned over time is that you just need to try to be as flexible as you can. You could take telescopes, binoculars, sometimes supplement those with an extra telescope or two. If I can get maybe basically a telescope for 10 people and a volunteer, say one maybe to two volunteers, maybe say like a volunteer for every 10 people, or maybe even 20 people if they're experienced people. I think you can kind of make it work. The people are pretty patient. They understand that not everybody can look at once. But there have been times when I've been completely stuck with a lot of people, and what I will do is I'll spend time talking about the night sky through maps, and that can involve a lot of people one time. So you have to get experience to this. But if you start practicing this, you'll find that it really works if you're a person that does this a little bit. So let's see if there are any more questions here. I know that we've kind of gone a little bit here about roughly about a half hour or so. And I apologize once again that we're going to have to record this and post this out to the Facebook. We simply couldn't get it working. Are there any other questions from the group here? I'm going to go ahead and stop share my spotlight here. Okay. Anybody else have any questions in the group here? All right, so we have a couple of people on our task force that are showing up here tonight to help out a little bit. Tommy, you have anything else before we sign off here? And I'll get this posted out to Facebook.
No, I think you did a great job, Don. Covered it well.
All right. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and I appreciate everybody for showing up tonight and helping out. We'll figure out what to do next month as far as our topic, and we'll take it from there. And thanks, Mark. Looks like our founder of this whole thing, Mark Stowbridge, has showed up, and so glad to have you guys there. And so, all right, we're going to sign off, and thank you very much.